Doo-doo-doo.
Hello and welcome to the 56th episode of PEM Podcast, the Psychic Guide Mystery Podcast. I'm your host, Victoria Laurie, with my schmabulous sister, Sandy. We've been sitting here the past 10 minutes
Laughing.
laughing, coming up with a theme song, something like "The Hills Are Alive with the Sound of Slaughter." So we're doing an axe murder today.
Yes, we are, but that's not the theme song. Thank you.
Yes. Me a name. I shout, help me.
Okay, this is a great way to start.
Way to run for your life.
Right.
Oh, goofy times. I was the reason that the topic came up was I spent last weekend with a very dear friend of mine who owns a house on the lake. It's a historical home, and she's owned it for 30 years. I've known her for 35 years, so I've been to this house several times, and it's haunted as fuck. And so there's only one bedroom I feel comfortable sleeping in.
Oh,
but to
great.
get to it, I have to pass this room. I know, like I have to pass this room, and I'm always like, trying to squeeze over the other side of the hallway.
Yes.
Yeah. Ooh. And that's one where I don't care how much liquid you've had at night, you are holding that until the first rays of dawn, because I'm not headed to the bathroom down the hall. Nope, that's not happening. So
I'm sleeping in the car. That's it.
Exactly. Well, she just bought the house next door to a really adorable cottage. So I think from now on I'll be like, what? Oh, they want me in the cottage. I need to go
in
to
my
there.
car in the
Yes,
cottage.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful home. She's done an amazing job restoring it. But it's really super haunted. It used to be a brothel at one point too.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it was a brothel for like the automotive elites back in like the 1940s.
Interesting.
So no, it wasn't. Sorry. It was a hospital for doctors for what?
I thought you were like, no, it was a hospital for mentally insane versus a brothel.
No.
Like,
yeah, no. It was a brothel for not automotive elite, but in that area, a lot of doctors had purchased homes on the lake, so the doctors would come up and frequent the house. I don't know if any of the ghosts are whores, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Whore.
Yeah.
I see dead horse. No, I'm kidding.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah. So the basement really creeps me out. I mean, basements creep me out anyway, but that basement, ugh. And every once in a while I have to go down because we're moving stuff up and down. She's still renovating, so there's a lot that often needs to be moved. So up and down the stairs, and I'm just like, okay, I will do this one thing for you. I'd stand at the top of the stairs and do not move.
Yes. While I haul
you hear
this
me
up.
screaming, come down.
Well, it's interesting that you are not interested in encountering ghosts.
Ghosts have, Sandy, as you know, like I've always been sort of a target for ghosts, and they fucking creep me out. Like they really, I don't know why, but do you remember when we were, so there's a story when I was 3 and Sandy was 6. I have no memory of this, but it's been told to me over and over again. And we were staying in some historic hotel
in Colorado.
Mm-hmm. I have no memory. And supposedly I woke up and there was a man with a stovepipe hat.
Mm-hmm.
And you had just been told the story of the Sandman.
Mm-hmm.
So I roll over and I'm like, Sandy, someone's here. And you're like, it's just the Sandman, go back to sleep. So I roll back over. And every time I rolled over to be like, he's still here. It's the Sandman. Boy.
Well, he kept, every time you rolled in one direction, he'd go to that side of the bed. And then back.
I did not know he went to that side of the bed.
Yeah.
I thought he just stood at the head of the bed.
No, he kept moving every time you rolled, whatever direction you rolled in, he walked in.
Wow. Okay.
Or floated.
Not sleeping tonight. Oh, that's thank God, I was so traumatized. I have no memory of that whatsoever.
Well, it was just a black silhouette outline. Like you couldn't see any features or, it was just a silhouette outline. He wasn't, I don't remember him being menacing.
Going to the side of the bed, I'm sorry, is creepy as fuck.
But It's not like he was standing over you. He was just at the foot of the bed every time you
with
were
an axe.
didn't see an axe.
Oh my God, yeah. And so many encounters ever since. Just ugh, I don't like them. Grounded spirits are just, I don't, no bueno. I will talk to anybody's dead relative anytime you ask, and I'm being paid for it. I will absolutely do that.
But if you're not paying for me and they're not
You're not paying
grounded,
for
I'm
it,
out.
then get
I'm
in
out.
line. Yeah.
I'm out.
Yeah, exactly. Done. But yeah, I had no idea it was following me like to the side of the bed. Like that is, oh my God, that is creepy as fuck. And now I'm gonna put that in a book. Speaking of which, like that segue? Wasn't that a good segue? That was
It
a
was.
really, really good
It
segue.
was. It
I
was.
thought it was. So I've been writing number 11 in the Ghost Hunter Mystery Series, and it takes place in Santa Fe, has a lot to do with the Native American fictional history of Heath Whitefeather, who's MJ's husband, his tribe. So in Ghoul Interrupted, I introduced you to his story, his origin story, and his family, and the tribe that he came from. And of course, I had to set a demon in it. And the historical Native American story that I put in it explained where his family got the name Whitefeather. So in the 11th book, I go back to the scene of the crime, different demon. But this one, I had an idea, and as I'm writing it, I'm like, there are times when I'm writing a mystery and I'm like, I want to like stop and be like, I'm a genius.
Yeah, I say that daily.
So there's a really, really good plot to this
Excellent.
one.
Excellent.
So
Well, this was I mean, of the entire Ghoul Hunters mystery, right? Ghost Hunters mystery.
Yeah.
This book that you're holding up and the Axe Murderer are my two favorites in the series. So actually, I also really liked
our Ghoul's best friend was the one you're talking about with Hatchet
Jack. Yeah.
See how there's a theme today.
There is. It's called Axes. X's and Axes. No, just Axes. And then, but then I will also say in the
next week, chainsaws.
Don't tune in.
Because why not?
Yeah. No, but in the Ghost Hunters mysteries, the other book that I really, really loved was the one where Gilly and MJ head down to the south. Is that the last book?
That was the penultimate. That's the second to last book.
Yeah. Awesome story. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. That shed light on MJ's origin and Gilly's origin story.
Yeah.
So it was important for me to give an explanation as to why MJ turned out the way that she did. So and that history, both of those histories come back into this 11th book. And I have decided that I will do at least 3 more because I kind of want the story to kind of continue where MJ is, because there's just so much rich material there. So
I'm sure your fans are very excited that you're writing beyond book 10. Yeah, they are. I'm sure they are.
We've moved on. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, so I'm rereading it. And there are times when like I come across a funny line and I laugh out loud, and I'm like, Victoria, you can't laugh out loud. You wrote this. Like, but then there's no one around to see me. So I feel like,
yeah,
it's funny.
Yeah.
So
all those spirits that are haunting you, they're laughing with you.
Yeah, right. And of course, this was the book that I brought up to the lake, right?
Yeah.
And that I'm reading right before. So I'm writing about a demon during the day, and I'm reading about a demon at night who's not getting any sleep. Hello.
Again, sleeping in my car. So do you have an anecdote for this week?
No, you said that you did. So like, I have tons of anecdotes. I've been saving them. Yeah. But I will defer to you.
All right. So on Friday, my gorgeous sister was kind enough to give me a quick reading. And I always feel so loved when you give me a reading, because I feel that, our family that's crossed over is around us, and then I love whatever it is that you're predicting for me. So anyway, during the reading, I had asked you about our friend who we've shared on the podcast before, with the picture frame being moved, right?
Yes.
Yes. So this friend of mine, and Victoria knows, lost one of his very close friends who's crossed over the other side, and back at
His best
Christmas
friend. He
time,
lost his best friend.
best friend.
Yeah.
They're a day apart in birth. So at Christmas time, I was visiting with Jim, and the next morning he called to tell me that a picture frame in his office had been moved from a bookcase all the way over to in front of his computer, which was the photo frame. The photo in the frame contained a picture of Jim and his best friend who's crossed. So it was kind of like an incredible thought that a picture actually moved physically from one end of the room to the other. So during your reading on Friday, I asked if you had any messages for Jim, and you told me that his best friend was going to affect lights in Jim's house to let him know that he was around.
Yeah.
So I didn't get around to sending Jim a note about that until this morning. And so the specific message was, if Jim has just changed a light bulb, or there's a particular lamp in his house that continually goes off for unknown reasons, or the light that he's just replaced doesn't work, that is his friend.
Mhm.
And lo and behold, I send him this message this morning, and he sends me a text right back and says, "You're not going to believe it, but I screwed in a light bulb into the porch last night and it went out inexplicably." So had I been,
that's our dearly departed going, ta-da!
Yes, exactly. But had I been timely in sharing this with him, he would have then known, but it kind of felt like I was after the fact. But regardless.
No, I think he believed you, though, right? Because so
Yes,
many
he
freaky
did.
things have come through from that particular soul on the other side.
Yeah,
And what
yeah.
I loved was the soul on the other side was so adamant. He's like, "I'm never moving another picture
Yes,
again." That took me all night. It took him all night. It took him all night. And there was a point at which he didn't know if he was going to make it, get the photo in front of the computer in time.
Yes.
And he was sweating it on the other side. So I thought it was adorable.
Yes.
But Sandy and I both know this lovely gentleman who crossed over, and what a force to be reckoned with. The man was like, he was the sun. He would just absolutely, he wouldn't just light up a room, he would light up the whole fucking block. He was really, which is just lovely that he's affecting lights. So,
yes, absolutely. The other interesting thing is that Jim did have a reading with a medium back in January, and out of the blue, no, it wasn't you. Out of the blue,
different
that
medium.
I'd never heard of this person. He happened to go see this person in person, and out of the blue, this particular medium mentioned the photo and said, your friend from the other side is responsible for the photo. So I liked that there was
who else could it have been? Right.
I know, but I liked that there was a third party involved that had no knowledge of the situation. So anyway, that's the anecdote.
Of course, I also love that this gentleman who's on the other side, who's a dear friend of all of ours, was not modest.
No, loud and proud.
Camera.
Yeah.
He was in front of it. So any opportunity to stand and admire himself, and he was really, really beautiful man. So I love that, like, he's like, "Have you seen this photo of me?" Oh, good.
What about this one?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Exactly. They're so fun. And you know what's really interesting was when he was coming through and he was talking about affecting the lights for Jim, I remembered that I was giving a reading to someone, I think last week, and my lights went boop, 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 boop.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Who's there?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
please identify
if you're
yourself.
Grounded, I'm out of here. If you're over on the other side, hello and welcome, welcome, welcome.
Yes. Please identify yourself.
Oh my God. Yeah. So, and talk about creep factor today. We're discussing axe murders. Sandy and I had also shared, we're like, oh, axe murders are particularly popular. So maybe we should add, maybe we should have axe murder month. And then maybe, it's death by flamethrower month or something, Next week, chainsaws. The week after that,
no,
running over with a car.
Yes,
flat as pancake. Yeah, crime is isn't that pretty?
It is
pretty.
not.
Yeah, especially like you say axe murder. Already, I'm riveted. Like
Well, it's
that
a
is,
gruesome way to go. Just
oh, it's
absolutely
horrible. It's
gruesome way to
horrible.
go.
It's absolutely horrible. Everybody always wonders, did they feel it? Right? Because if you're
Yes.
killing someone with an axe, it's not like you're stabbing them.
Yeah.
You are aiming for the head,
Yeah.
right? So there's a cringe factor there. Like,
Yeah.
what if the first blow doesn't do it? You know?
Well,
Ugh.
worse still, if you think about the intent, right, of the person
Oh yeah.
wielding the axe.
I
So
mean,
anyway, this case was suggested to us by Barbara Kelly, and we're going to
thank
cover
you, Barbara.
the Villisca axe murders, which is actually a 100-year-old mystery that to this day remains unsolved. And our story begins sometime between the late evening of June 9th, 1912, and the early morning of June 10th. A mass murder was committed in the sleepy town of Villisca, Iowa. 6 members of the Joseph B. Moore family, along with 2 house guests, were found bludgeoned with severe head wounds from an axe. A lengthy investigation into the horrific crime yielded multiple suspects, one of whom was tried twice. The first trial ended in a hung jury, and the second one ended in an acquittal. 100 years later, the crime remains unsolved. On June 9, 1912, it unfolded like a typical Sunday at the Stillinger farmhouse of Joseph and Sarah and their daughters, 12-year-old Lena and 8-year-old Ina. The girls left home for church, and following the morning service, they planned on spending the afternoon, including dinner, with their grandmother. The girls also intended to spend the night at their grandmother's house after the Children's Day exercises concluded later that evening. However, their plans changed when the girls were invited by 10-year-old Mary Catherine Moore to spend the night at the Moore home instead. The Children's Day program at the Presbyterian Church was an annual event and began at 8 p.m. on Sunday evening, June 9th. Mrs. Sarah Moore coordinated the exercises in which all 4 of the Moore children, Herman, aged 11, Mary Catherine, aged 10, Arthur, 7, Paul, 5, and the 2 Stillinger sisters participated. The program ended at 9:30 p.m., and the Moore family, along with Lena and Ina Stillinger, walked home from the church to the Moore residence at 508 East 2nd Street. The group reportedly entered the home sometime between 9:45 and 10 p.m. that evening. At 7 a.m. the next morning, Mary Peckham, the Moore's next-door neighbor, realized that the family had not come outdoors to do their morning chores. Out of concern, Mary knocked on their front door, but when nobody answered, she tried to open the door, but she found it locked. After letting the Moore's chickens out, Mary called Ross Moore, Josiah's brother, to tell him about her concerns. Upon arrival, Ross knocked on the front door and shouted through a main floor bedroom window, but received no response. Now alarmed, Ross unlocked the front door with his copy of his house key and entered the home, leaving Mary on the front porch. Ross went through the parlor, and after opening the guest bedroom door, to his horror, he found Ina and Lena Stillinger's motionless bodies on the bed. Ross yelled to Mary to call Hank Horton, Villisca's primary peace officer, who arrived shortly thereafter. Hank's search of the house revealed that the entire Moore family and the 2 Stillinger girls had been bludgeoned to death with an axe. Their murder weapon belonging to Josiah was found in the guest room where the Stillinger sisters lay dead. Doctors concluded that the murders had taken place between midnight and 5 a.m. and theorized that the killer or killers began in the master bedroom where 43-year-old Josiah and 39-year-old Sarah Moore were sleeping. Josiah received more blows from the axe than any other victim. His face had been cut to such an extent that his eyes were missing. The perpetrator also used the blade of the axe to kill Sarah. Herman, Mary Catherine, Arthur, and Paul were all found in their beds, bludgeoned in the head by a blunt end of an axe. The murderer then returned to the master bedroom to inflict even more blows on the elder Moores before moving downstairs to the guest bedroom off the parlor to kill Ina and Lena. Ina was sleeping closest to the wall with Lena on her right side. A gray coat covered her face. Lena, according to the inquest testimony of Dr. F.S. Williams, quote, lay as though she had been knocked 1 foot out of her bed sideways, with the other hand up under the pillow on the right side, half sideways. Not clear over just a little bit. Apparently, she had been struck in the head and squirmed down in the bed, perhaps 1/3 of the way, end quote. Lena's nightgown was slit up and she was wearing no undergarments. There was a blood stain on the inside of her right knee and what the doctors assumed was a defensive wound on her arm. It is believed that she is the only victim to have attempted to fight off the attacker. Additional observations from the grisly scene included: curtains were drawn on all of the windows in the house except for 2, which did not have curtains and were instead covered with clothing belonging to the Moores. Every exterior door to the house was locked. All the victims' faces were covered with bedclothes after they were killed. A kerosene lamp was found at the foot of the bed of Josiah and Sarah. The chimney was off and the wick had been turned back. The chimney was found under the dresser. A similar lamp was found at the foot of the bed of the Stillinger sisters. The chimney was also off. The ceilings in the parents' bedroom and the children's rooms showed gouge marks apparently made by the upswing of the axe. A piece of a watch chain was found on the floor in the downstairs guest bedroom, and an attempt was made to wipe the murder weapon clean. A pan of bloody water was discovered on the kitchen table, as well as a plate of uneaten food. And a 2-pound slab of bacon wrapped in a dish towel was found on the floor lying near the axe. A second slab of bacon about the same size was found in the icebox. Some accounts suggest that the 2 spent cigarettes were discovered in the attic and indicated that the killer or killers had laid in wait until the family and guests had fallen asleep. No one knows why the Moore family was targeted. Josiah was one of Villisca's most prominent businessmen, and he and his wife Sarah, whom he married in 1899, had been residents of Villisca for 13 years. For the first 9 years of the family's residency in Villisca, Josiah was employed by Frank Jones at the Jones store. And in 1908, Josiah opened up his own implement company, taking the lucrative John Deere franchise with him, much to the chagrin of Frank Jones. In terms of the investigation, several possible suspects connected to the Moore family were considered, including Frank Jones, Reverend George Kelly, William Mansfield, Loving Mitchell, Paul Mueller, and Henry Lee Moore, who is not related to the Moore family. Frank F. Jones was a Villisca resident and an Iowa state senator. It was well known among the townspeople that there was bad blood between Frank and Josiah because of Josiah's departure from the Jones store to open his own business, taking the very successful John Deere dealership with him. Additionally, Josiah was rumored to have had a sexual affair with Frank's daughter-in-law, Donna Jones, though no evidence supports this speculation. Detective James Newton Wilkerson of the Burns Detective Agency openly accused Frank and his son Albert of hiring William Mansfield to kill Josiah. However, neither Frank nor Albert was ever arrested, and both denied vehemently any connection to the murders. William Blackie Mansfield of Blue Island, Illinois, was also known as George Worley and/or Jack Turnbaugh. According to Detective Wilkerson, Mansfield was a cocaine fiend and a serial killer. The detective also believes that Mansfield was responsible for the axe murders of his wife, infant child, father-in-law, and mother-in-law in Blue Isle, Illinois on July 5, 1914, which was 2 years after the Villisca axe murders. The axe murders committed in Paola, Kansas, 4 days before the Villisca murders, and the murders of Jenny Peterson and Jenny Miller in Aurora, Colorado. Wilkerson's investigation revealed that all of these murders were committed in precisely the same manner, indicating the same man committed them. In each case, the victims were hacked to death with an axe, the mirrors in each of the homes were covered, a burning lamp with a chimney off was left at the foot of the bed, and a basin in which the murderer washed was found in the kitchen. At every crime scene, the murderer avoided leaving fingerprints by wearing gloves, which Wilkerson strongly believes was evidence that the killer was Mansfield, who knew his fingerprints were on file with the federal military prison at Leavenworth. Wilkerson stated that he could prove that Mansfield was present in each of these places on the night of the murders and managed to convince a grand jury to open an investigation. In 1916, Mansfield was arrested and brought to Montgomery County, Iowa from Kansas City. Payroll records, however, provided an alibi that placed Mansfield in Illinois at the time of the Villisca murders. He was released for lack of evidence and later won a lawsuit that he brought against Wilkerson and was awarded $2,225. The next suspect, Reverend George Jacqueline Kelly, was an English-born traveling minister, and after several years of preaching throughout the Midwest, he and his wife had settled in Macedonia, Iowa in 1912. Kelly was described as peculiar, reportedly having suffered a mental breakdown as an adolescent, and as an adult, he had been accused on several occasions of peeping and asking young women and girls to pose nude for him. Kelly arrived in Villisca on June 8, 1912 to teach the Children's Day services, and he left town between 5 a.m. and 5:50 a.m. on June 10th, mere hours before the 6 murder victims were discovered at the Moore house. In the weeks that followed, he displayed a fascination with the Moore case and wrote many letters to the police, investigators, and families of the deceased. His obsessive behavior aroused suspicion, prompting a private investigator to write a letter to the Reverend asking for any information that the minister might know about the murders. Kelly replied with a detailed letter claiming to have heard sounds and possibly witnessed the murders. However, his well-documented mental illness caused authorities to question whether Kelly committed the murders or was imagining his account of the crime. In 1914, 2 years after the murders, Kelly was arrested for sending obscene material through the mail. He was actually sexually harassing a woman who had applied for a job as his secretary. He was sent to St. Elizabeth's Hospital, the National Mental Hospital in Washington, D.C., for treatment. In 1917, Kelly was arrested for the Villisca murders. Police obtained a confession from him. However, it followed many hours of interrogation, and Kelly later recanted. He was tried twice for the murders of the Moore family and the Stillinger sisters. The first trial resulted in a hung jury, and he was acquitted at the conclusion of the second trial. Following his arduous time in Iowa, he moved to Kansas City, Connecticut, and finally New York City. The remaining years of his life and his final resting place are unknown. Henry Lee Moore is the next suspect, and M.W. McClaughry, a federal officer assigned to the Villisca case, announced in May of 1913 that he had solved not only the Villisca murders, but 22 others that had been committed in the Midwest around the same time frame. McClaughry's theory was that Henry Lee Moore, he was again not related to Josiah Moore, was the serial killer responsible for all 22 murders. Moore was released from the Kansas State Reformatory in Hutchinson, Kansas on April 11, 1911, after serving time for a forgery charge. In September of 1911, in Colorado Springs, Colorado, H.C. Wayne, his wife and child, and Mrs. A.J. Burnham and her 2 children were bludgeoned with an axe, and windows were covered with bedding. A month later, in October of 1911, a family was killed in Monmouth, Illinois, and a week later, 5 members of a family in Ellsworth, Kansas were murdered as they slept. In early June of 1912, a week before the Villisca axe murders, a man and his wife were killed in Paola, Kansas. All of these murders were executed in an eerily similar way to the Villisca murders. Henry Moore was convicted of the murdering of his mother and maternal grandmother in Columbia, Missouri, just months after the murders in Villisca. Both women were killed with an axe just as brutally as the victims in Villisca. Testimony during Moore's trial revealed that he had lived with his mother and grandmother during the winter of 1911 and the summer of 1912, and they'd left their home to take a job on the railroad. Henry Lee Moore served 36 years of a life sentence before being paroled by the governor of Missouri on December 2nd, 1949, and his sentence was commuted on July 30th, 1956, 6 months shy of his 83rd birthday. His last known residence was the Salvation Army Center in St. Louis, and it is unknown when he died or where he was living at that time. Andrew Sawyer, another suspect. Every transient and otherwise unaccounted for stranger was the suspect in murders, and Andrew Sawyer was one of those people. He was known to be obsessed with the murders and slept fully clothed as if he was ready to make a clean getaway. He also slept with an axe by his bed. Sawyer was interrogated but not charged, as no real evidence linked him to the crime. He was dismissed as a suspect in the case when he was able to prove that he'd been in Osceola, Iowa, on the night of the murders. He had been arrested for vagrancy, and the sheriff recalled putting him on a train at approximately 11 p.m. that evening. And the final suspect, Paul Mueller, in their 2017 book, The Man from the Train, Bill James and his daughter Rachel McCarthy James discussed the Villisca murders as part of their much larger series of murders, which they believe were all committed by a single serial killer, Paul Mueller. Mueller, an immigrant from Germany, was initially wanted for the 1897 murder of a family in West Brookfield, Massachusetts, who had employed him as a farmhand. The author's research turned up archival newspaper stories detailing dozens of families murdered under very similar circumstances across the United States, and they believe that Mueller was guilty of the Villisca murders as part of a spree that lasted over a decade, killing at least 59 people in 14 separate incidents, including the Colorado Springs and Paola crimes. The serial killer selected families who lived near railroad tracks, indicating the killer traveled via train from town to town and randomly ambushed his victims just after midnight while they slept. This assailant typically used an axe found in the victim's home and struck his prey with the blunt side of the axe rather than the blade in the head and the face. The killer also covered the victims with blankets to prevent blood spatter, covered windows from inside the house, left the murder weapon in plain sight, and locked the doors before departure. In Mueller's suspected crimes, there was often, but not always, a sexual motive directed towards a pubescent girl, as was the situation with Lena Stillinger, who was discovered partially disrobed. The Moore's former home still stands today. Many claim it is haunted. Visits by investigators have provided audio, video, and photographic proof of paranormal activity, including sounds of children's voices, falling lamps, moving ladders, and flying objects. Were the Villisca axe murders committed by a serial killer, a mentally unstable man, or was it a murder for hire? Perhaps Victoria knows. My sources for this story include Wikipedia, the Villisca axe murders, www.villiscaiowa.com, the official website for the Villisca axe murder house. And that was it for my sources, just two. So V, you said before we got on air that you had a very clear understanding of who committed this crime. So
Yeah,
what are your thoughts?
hands down was Paul Miller. Like it just when I first started reading, like I was probably third paragraph in, and I thought at the introduction of Lena and Ilna, I'm like, he targeted one of the girls, one of those two girls. So it's just so obvious to me in the ether that it's Paul Miller, because I went through all of the other suspects, and on paper they look like, they really could have been. One guy confesses, another one kills his mom and his
Henry Lee Moore. Yeah.
yeah
Bit of a wackadoodle. Yeah.
yeah so but the distance between the thing that I kept kicking out the more words, Victoria. I'll get there.
Henry Lee
I'll get
Moore.
there.
Right.
Yeah,
Was
Henry
the-
Moore. I kept kicking him out because it's 183 miles between supposedly he committed these two murders 4 days apart, but it's 183 miles between the two locations. And I was just scrolling on my phone trying to find train tracks that were sort of a direct route, and I couldn't find any. I
Yeah.
might be wrong, but like it just felt like that's logistically, that's really hard. The timing would have had to have been like perfect, and he would have had to have been up for another round of axe murders. Okay,
Mhm,
not to be
mhm.
too morbid, but like that's a lot of energy. That's a lot of energy. So when I hit on Paul Muller's name, it was just like bink, that one. And I can't tell you why, other than when I saw his photo, it just totally matched the description of I didn't see him per se, but
Yeah.
there's a feeling of a shape to the face and a shape to the body. And I'm like, he fits that. So for me, it's Paul Miller. I wish I could tell you, specifically Candlestick by Colonel Mustard,
Yeah. Yeah.
but he just popped off the page. It's this guy. And then I was digging into the book, The Man from the Train. I read an interview from the co-author, the daughter of so I read an interview from Rachel McCarthy.
Rachel
Sorry.
McCarthy James. Yeah.
Yep. And she scoured newspapers. So for like 4 years, all she did was look at newspapers looking for like tens of thousands of newspapers looking for axe murders. And she found a pattern that she can place on Paul Muller. And I believe her. I think that they nailed it. And that was incredible investigative work, truly. But I really think he did it.
It's awful.
Yeah.
It's interesting that the Villisca axe murder ended up being like the one that was the most infamous.
Exactly.
If he killed 59 people in 14 separate incidences,
right.
Well,
that's why I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's just interesting to me that this is the one that kind of bubbled up publicly to the degree that it did.
There was sort of addressed in the interview that I was reading. They were like, why this one over that one? And she said, there's really no rhyme or reason, because certainly there were murders involving an axe in more famous people, more known people, like Frank Lloyd Wright's assistant murdered a whole bunch of people, or servant, not assistant, servant, murdered a whole bunch of people. And like, no one, like that was the first I'd ever heard of it. And I'm a big fan of Frank Lloyd Wright. So that was news to me. So that's why she went digging into these newspapers, because there wasn't really any, like we have the interwebs now, something can go viral, but it was much, much, much harder for this type of thing to go viral. And in fact, in some cities, because this did gain national attention, in some cities, it knocked the sinking of the Titanic off the front page, which is really incredible when you think about it. But I think it's the heinousness, horrificness, the creepiness of this act, where he's covering up the windows and the mirrors. And I know that there's a theory out there that he was covering up the windows and the mirrors he was covering up the window so no one would see inside, and he was covering up the mirrors. I forget why someone tossed a theory out. And I'm like, this was his ritual. It was his ritual.
Yeah.
So it wasn't necessarily to stop prying eyes from looking in, because he committed all of these murders in the dark. The tiniest little flame was up. So I don't think he was worried about being seen. I think it was like just part of the ritual to contain the space, the sort of sacred space within which he would take these lives. And uh, yeah, like his motivation was prepubescent girls. He I believe targeted families with prepubescent little girls. So the second I read Ilna's or Lena's name, I'm like, oh damn, she was the lure.
Yeah.
So
Unfortunately.
yeah, poor love. And he killed her last, which
Yeah.
tells me she was the lure.
Well, I don't know if you and I encourage the audience, if you want, there are several YouTube videos of the home because it is a historical house and you can tour it. Based on the description, when I was first researching the case, I thought, oh, this must be a big house. It's actually very tiny, and there's only I think 3 rooms on the main floor: the parlor, the kitchen, and then this guest bedroom.
Yeah.
And then upstairs, there's only 2 rooms. There's the
Mhm.
main, the primary bedroom for the husband and the wife, and then all 4 children slept in the second bedroom. So I'm astounded that someone could be in the house and be as quiet that
Mhm.
he needed to be as he, and how do you not wake up the other person as you're, I mean, they're
That's
all in the
what
same room.
so he put the coverings over all of the people before he struck them. So you are dulling the noise with the bedclothes, and he probably was if he was practiced at this, which apparently he was, if he
Yeah.
committed 159 murders, he was obviously very strong. So I think, boom, 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 round 2, boom, 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 boom.
Oh,
So if
okay.
he hit them once,
Yeah.
boom,
To
they're
stun
done.
them and
Yeah,
knew where he was hitting them.
right,
Yeah.
right. So he would just aim for the head as hard as he could, and then go around, and then just keep doing that. Um, I have a feeling, and I know this is like terrible to even contemplate, but I have a feeling that Josiah lived through the initial, um,
Bludgeoning.
yeah, and that's why he returned and just decimated him. I have a feeling that Josiah was still alive when he went to the children's rooms. I don't think that he was conscious. I think though that he was laboring, breathing, or something. I think that there was movement with him, and that's why this guy was so vicious. He just wanted to make sure that Josiah was dead. So awful. And I don't
Yeah.
know if Mary is it Mary, his wife?
Yes.
Yeah, or is it Sarah?
Sarah.
Sarah,
Sorry, Sarah
yeah.
Moore.
I
Yeah.
don't know if Sarah, when he hit Josiah, I don't know if Sarah woke up. I have a feeling she didn't. I have a feeling he hit Paul pretty hard and then went to her.
Mhm.
Um, and I think also the reason for covering up the people before he was bludgeoning them was the blood splatter would get all over the axe and make it slippery. Which is, I'm like, want to throw up contemplating this. I know it happened over 100 years ago, but my God,
Yeah.
just awful.
Then
So
did you perceive whether or not he was hiding in the attic before the
yes,
family got home?
yeah, yeah. I'm like, he didn't break in; he was already there. So, and I mean, can you? Oh my God,
No.
I've seen that done as a plot to certain crime shows, and it like always creeps me the hell
Yeah.
out,
Somebody's in your house. Yeah.
right? Like that's the ultimate Halloween,
Yeah. Yeah. For
movie.
sure. For
Freddy
sure.
Krueger.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. Run.
yeah, now that we're all sufficiently creeped out.
Yes. Read Victoria's book, get creeped out, and then follow up on this case, get creeped out.
Yeah.
But thank you, Barbara Kelly. I have to admit, I thought initially when she proposed it that this was something that took place in Italy. because I was pronouncing the name wrong. So when I started to read up on it, I was like, wow, this is a fascinating case. So thank you
Yeah.
very much, Barbara, for suggesting it.
Yeah.
Rightly
It
so.
makes,
Rightly so.
I really want to read the book, A Man from the Train.
The train.
Yeah, because she dug in so thoroughly. It's so thoroughly researched. You got to really give props to that amazing
for sure.
job that she did. So buy my book, buy hers. So yeah. So thanks for writing this up, Sans. I hope you wrote
Absolutely.
it during the day because I was
Yeah, I write all my cases during the day. There's no nighttime for Sandy. No,
right.
no.
I was reading this for the first time in the morning and the phone rang and I went,
I believe it.
yeah,
Super
it's
creepy.
super, super creepy. So anyway, all right, Lovey, I love you so much.
You too.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thanks everybody for watching. And we'll be back next week with another creepy
Another
one.
case.
Another
Yeah, no.
really creepy one,
Yeah,
honestly. It's another
yeah.
really super, whole family
So
murdered kind of thing.
if we want to know more about you,
Oh, head to victorialaurie.com to learn more about me or to sign up for an appointment with me. I promise I will not bring in any axe murderers from the other side. No butchers. So only good loved ones.
and you have a Patreon page up.
So getting a lot of subscribers on the Patreon page. I'm trying to post there as much as possible. So a couple of things that the Patreon page offers, it offers predictions coming up. So I cover finance and I cover politically, and I'm about to go deep dive into the weather that's coming up over the course of the next 6 months, and any other new trends that I can hit on. And then I also do a Dear Victoria column. So if you have one, and I do mean one thing that you would like some intuitive advice on, please send an email to victoria@victorialaurie.com. And with the subject header, Dear Victoria, and if you can give yourself an anonymous name, that's helpful. If not, I will come up with one for you. Cannot tell you that you might like it or not, but I will do my best. So again, one topic,
Yeah,
not
don't make her choose.
7.
Yeah, don't make her
So
choose.
many of these emails are like, I want to know this. I'm like, sign up for a freaking reading, like pay me. This is how I make my living, people. So one topic per person. So anyway, okay, love you and thank you and
Thanks,
see you
everyone.
soon. Okay,
Sounds
bye.
great. Okay, bye.